Hello, jewels of inestimable value. A strong woman knows how to keep her life in order. Even with tears in her eyes, she still manages to say, "I'm fine," with a smile. But what happens when that strong woman is no longer playing nice? When she's not just strong, but unbreakable, calculating, and utterly indifferent to the games meant to control her? Welcome to the world of the Sigma female, where silent strength shatters fragile egos without ever lifting a finger. In a society where men are often conditioned to believe they hold the power, there's nothing more terrifying to the male ego than a woman who needs from him. She doesn't flatter, she doesn't fight for attention, and she doesn't care for praise. Instead, she quietly dismantles his sense of control in ways he never sees coming. How? By refusing to engage in the very games that feed his pride. This is not just any woman, it's the Sigma female, and her methods are unlike anything you've ever seen. Let's dive deep into the psyche of this mysterious and powerful archetype as we uncover 10 devastating ways a Sigma female can dismantle a man's ego without ever breaking a sweat. Buckle up because this ride won't be gentle. Let's discuss this, shall we? Number 1. Never engaging in pettiness, making his attempts look childish. A Sigma female doesn't waste her energy on pettiness. When a man tries to provoke her, throw childish jabs, or engage in immature mind games, she doesn't bite. He might expect an argument, a dramatic reaction, or some kind of emotional outburst, but instead, she gives him nothing. No anger, no frustration, not even a dismissive eye roll. She's completely unbothered. This lack of engagement hits harder than any insult ever could. Men who thrive on ego games depend on reactions to feel powerful. Reactions that validate their efforts, that show they've struck a nerve. But when the Sigma female shows zero interest, it turns his attempts into something small and, quite frankly, embarrassing. He's left standing there trying to poke at someone who doesn't even acknowledge his efforts. It's like swinging at air. What makes this even more brutal is that she's not ignoring him out of spite or some passive-aggressive tactic. She genuinely sees no value in playing his games. To her, it's not a power struggle worth participating in because she's above it. Her self-worth isn't tied to how he perceives her or how he wants her to react. And that's what shatters his ego the most. Her indifference shows him how insignificant his attempts truly are. Number 2. Rejecting praise as manipulative tactics. When a Sigma female is praised, she doesn't fall for it like most people would. Compliments meant to manipulate or flatter her for a purpose are met with polite indifference. She sees right through the attempt to control her with praise, and it has no effect. Men often use praise as a way to get women on their side or make them more receptive, thinking that a few kind words can soften resistance or boost ego. But for a Sigma female, praise doesn't hold that kind of power. This rejection of praise completely throws a man off his game. He's used to women responding with gratitude or feeling indebted in some way after receiving compliments. When she doesn't react the way he expects, when she doesn't gush, thank him, or even seem impressed, it leaves him confused and insecure. It shows him that she can't be easily influenced, that he can't use his words to gain control over her, and this punches a hole in his ego. To her, compliments that are used as tools to manipulate are meaningless. She values authenticity and can spot the difference between genuine admiration and praise with strings attached. When she dismisses the latter, she's not being rude. She's just letting him know that his approval isn't what she's after. Her confidence and self-worth don't come from external validation, especially not from someone trying to use it as a tactic. This not only frustrates him, but also makes him realize that he has no power in their dynamic. Number 3. Thriving in independence, killing his need to feel needed. A Sigma female thrives on independence, and nothing crushes a man's ego more than realizing he isn't essential to her life. Men often build their self-worth around being needed, whether it's being the protector, the provider, or simply the person a woman relies on. But when they encounter a Sigma female, they quickly learn that she's fully capable of running her life without their help. She doesn't depend on anyone for emotional support, financial stability, or validation. She makes her own decisions, solves her own problems, and handles her own business. This level of independence can be intimidating, especially for a man who's used to women seeking him out for guidance or protection. He's left wondering, The Sigma female's independence sends a clear message. She doesn't need him to feel complete. And that's where the real ego hit happens. He's been taught that his value is tied to being indispensable, but when she's perfectly fine on her own, it forces him to question his place in her life, and by extension, his sense of importance. She doesn't need his validation or approval, and that reality is like a punch to the gut. The most unsettling part for him is that she's not doing this to make a point or to hurt him. Her independence isn't about proving something. It's just who she is. She's built her world in a way that doesn't require anyone else to hold it up. And for a man who equates his worth with being needed, facing a woman who needs nothing from him is the ultimate ego blow. Number 4. Weaponizing silence as a power move. When a Sigma female chooses silence, it's not because she has nothing to say, it's because silence is her greatest weapon. While most people feel the need to fill the air with explanations, arguments, or emotions, she understands the power of saying nothing at all. This isn't passive, it's a calculated move. Her silence forces a man to sit with his own thoughts, and that's where the real damage happens. Men who are used to dominating conversations or pushing for reactions find themselves completely thrown off when she simply doesn't respond. He might expect her to argue back, to explain herself, or to justify her actions, but instead she leaves him hanging in the void of his own making. That silence isn't empty. It's filled with the weight of his own insecurity and uncertainty. This lack of response can be maddening because it strips him of control. Most men feed off reactions, whether it's anger, frustration, or even tears, because those reactions give them something to work with. They give him a sense of power. But when a Sigma female refuses to engage, it's as if she's taken away his ability to play the game altogether. He's left guessing, overthinking, and doubting everything he thought he knew. Her silence says, without words, that she doesn't owe him anything. Not an explanation, not a defense, not even the satisfaction of a reaction. This kind of control over her own energy and responses forces him to face his own insecurities. He starts questioning himself, his behavior, and his role in the situation. And that internal conflict is where his ego starts to unravel. In the end, it's her silence that speaks the loudest, leaving him powerless and off balance. Number 5. Unapologetically prioritizing her ambition over his ego. A Sigma female doesn't hesitate to put her ambition first, and this can be a devastating blow to a man's ego. Many men are used to being the priority in a relationship, believing that their needs, desires, and egos should come before everything else. But with a Sigma female, that's not the case. Her goals, dreams, and drive take center stage, and she makes no apologies for it. She's fiercely focused on her own path, and she won't slow down or shrink herself to make a man feel more comfortable. While others may sacrifice their ambitions to cater to a man's ego, the Sigma female knows her worth is tied to her success, not someone else's approval. This kind of determination can be intimidating because it shows she doesn't need to rely on anyone else for fulfillment. She's not looking for someone to define her, she's too busy defining herself. For a man who's used to being the main focus of a woman's attention, this shift can feel like a rejection. He might try to insert himself into her life, demand more of her time, or expect her to choose him over her goals. But the Sigma female's ambitions are non-negotiable. She won't drop everything for anyone, and that includes him. This forces him to realize that he isn't the center of her universe, and for a man whose self-esteem is built on that assumption, it's a harsh wake-up call. Her unapologetic pursuit of her dreams shows him that she's playing on a different level. She's not here to feed his ego or make him feel important. She's here to make something of herself. And if he can't handle that, she won't hesitate to leave him behind. It's not personal. It's just that her ambition outweighs the need to protect his pride. That kind of clarity and focus is what sets her apart. And it's what makes him realize just how small his ego is in the grand scheme of her life. Number 6. Outperforming him in his own territory. When a Sigma female steps into a man's territory and effortlessly outperforms him, it's a direct hit to his ego. Men often take pride in being the best at what they do, whether it's their job, a hobby, or some skill they've mastered. They thrive on being seen as the expert or the one in control. But when a Sigma female comes in and excels without even trying to compete, it shakes the very foundation of his self-worth. She doesn't do this to prove a point or to challenge him. She's simply good at what she does. Her confidence and competence speak for themselves, and her success isn't something she has to flaunt. It just is. But for a man whose identity is wrapped up in being the best, watching her surpass him in what he thought was his domain can feel like a punch to the gut. The worst part for him is that she's not trying to steal the spotlight or one-up him. She's not competing in the traditional sense. She's just doing what she does best, and doing it better than him. This leaves him feeling inadequate because he realizes her talent is genuine, not forced, and that he can't rely on the usual tactics of competition to bring her down. She's not playing his game, yet she's winning. His ego takes a beating because he's been outdone in a space he thought was his to own. And what's even more unsettling is that she doesn't need his approval or acknowledgement of her success. She's comfortable in her own ability and doesn't need to be praised for it, which only amplifies his sense of defeat. It's not just that she's better than him at something. It's that she doesn't even care about the recognition. Her quiet dominance speaks volumes, and it leaves him questioning his own abilities and worth. Number 7. Outgrowing his games and walking away without explanation. When a Sigma female outgrows a man's games and walks away without explanation, it leaves him completely blindsided. Most men are used to playing the usual relationship games, mind games, power plays, emotional manipulation. They expect a woman to stick around to confront them, argue, or demand answers. But a Sigma female doesn't give him the satisfaction. Instead, she quietly recognizes his games for what they are and makes a decision that shakes him to his core. She leaves. There's no drama, no heated argument, no need for closure. She's simply done, and when she's done, This is devastating for a man who expects some sort of reaction or, at the very least, an explanation. He's used to being in control, pulling the strings and knowing exactly where he stands. But when she walks away without a word, it leaves him confused and powerless. His usual tactics, whether they're meant to provoke jealousy, insecurity, or dependency, fall flat. He's left standing there, wondering where it all went wrong. The true blow to his ego comes from her refusal to engage. A Sigma female doesn't waste time trying to explain herself or teach him a lesson. She knows that playing his game only feeds into his need for attention and control. By walking away in silence, she's showing that he doesn't even deserve an explanation. This move flips the script entirely. He's now the one scrambling for answers, left to overthink and analyze every little detail. Her ability to outgrow his games also reveals something deeper. She was never trapped in the first place. While he might have thought he was pulling the strings, she was always aware of what was going on. She just chose not to entertain it anymore. And that realization, knowing that she saw through him the entire time, shatters his ego. Number 8. Challenging his intelligence without fear of retaliation. A Sigma female isn't afraid to challenge a man's intelligence, and she does so without the slightest hint of fear or hesitation. This isn't about picking fights or proving she's smarter. It's about calling things out when she knows something doesn't add up. When she challenges a man's thinking, opinions, or decisions, it can catch him off guard, especially if he's used to people going along with whatever he says to avoid conflict or boost his ego. For many men, their intelligence is deeply tied to their sense of self-worth. They like to believe they have the upper hand in most conversations, or that they're the ones in control of the intellectual dynamics. But when a Sigma female steps into the conversation, she's not there to stroke his ego or nod in agreement just to keep the peace. She'll question his ideas, point out flaws in his reasoning, and confidently offer her own perspective. And she'll do all this without being condescending or emotional, just calm, direct, and sure of herself. What makes this so unsettling for a man is that she's not doing it to impress anyone. She's not trying to prove how smart she is or outshine him. She's simply speaking her truth. This kind of intellectual honesty can be hard to handle for someone who's used to their ideas going unchallenged. It forces him to confront the possibility that he doesn't know everything, that someone else might have a better idea or a more insightful perspective. The real kicker is that she's unbothered by how he reacts. Whether he gets defensive, tries to shut her down, or throws out insults, it doesn't shake her. She isn't afraid of retaliation or backlash because she doesn't base her self-worth on his approval. This kind of fearlessness is rare and intimidating. It shows that she's more interested in the truth and intellectual growth than in making him feel comfortable. By challenging him, she forces him to reconsider his assumptions and face the fact that he's not always the smartest person in the room. And for a man whose ego is built on the belief that he holds the intellectual high ground, that's a hard pill to swallow. She's not afraid to shine a light on his blind spots, and in doing so, she exposes his vulnerabilities, leaving his ego more fragile than he'd ever admit. Number 9. Refusing to be impressed by his status or wealth. A Sigma female's indifference to a man's status or wealth is one of the most potent blows to his ego. Men often gauge their worth by the size of their bank accounts, the titles they hold, or the social circles they're part of. They believe that flaunting their success will automatically elevate their standing in others' eyes, especially in the eyes of a woman they're interested in. But when a Sigma female shows no interest in these superficial markers, it can be a hard hit. She doesn't play the game of admiration or deference based on wealth or status. To her, these things are just details, irrelevant to the real substance of a person. So when a man tries to impress her with his latest achievements, expensive toys, or high-profile connections, she responds with the same level of engagement as if he were discussing the weather. Her lack of awe or even acknowledgement of his material success sends a clear message. She doesn't value him for his status. This lack of reaction can be jarring because it flips the script on what he's used to. He might be used to people fawning over his achievements, expecting special treatment or admiration in return. But with her, his status holds no sway. She doesn't need his wealth to validate her. She's already secure in her own identity and doesn't measure people by their bank accounts or job titles. What really gets under his skin is realizing that she doesn't need his wealth or status to feel validated or fulfilled. Her reaction, or lack thereof, shows him that she's not impressed by the same things that usually make men feel superior. This realization makes him feel diminished, as if all his hard-earned status and wealth are worthless in her eyes. In her indifference, he sees his own insecurity reflected back at him. It forces him to confront the idea that his value isn't as tied to these external markers as he thought. And that's the real kicker. Being faced with the fact that someone who doesn't care about his wealth or status is actually more self-assured and grounded than he is. For a man who measures his worth by such superficial standards, that's a blow that cuts deep. Number 10. Being emotionally unavailable, rendering him irrelevant. When a Sigma female remains emotionally unavailable, it's like a gut punch to a man's ego. Men often see emotional connection as a way to measure their significance in a relationship. They expect that by opening up emotionally, they'll forge a bond that validates their worth and importance. But when she maintains her emotional distance, she flips this expectation on its head. She's not cold or unfeeling. She's simply self-sufficient. Her emotional state isn't something he can influence or manipulate. This is unsettling because it disrupts the usual dynamics where emotional engagement is seen as a sign of closeness or dependence. Instead, she shows that her happiness and self-worth are not dependent on anyone else's approval or attention. Her emotional unavailability makes him question his place in her life and whether he's really as important as he thought. The more he tries to connect with her or draw out her feelings, the more he's met with a steady wall of calm. This isn't about being deliberately evasive. It's about being genuinely content and secure in her own emotional world. She doesn't need to seek validation through constant interaction or emotional displays. This lack of emotional reciprocity forces him to confront his own insecurities. He starts questioning whether he's truly significant or if he's just another face in the crowd. Her emotional unavailability is a powerful statement. It tells him that she doesn't require his emotional input to feel complete. Her self-sufficiency highlights his own neediness and dependence on others for validation. As he struggles to break through her emotional barrier, he's forced to face the uncomfortable truth that his own self-worth might be built on shaky ground. Ultimately, the Sigma female's impact is a reminder that true power and confidence come from within, and it's a lesson in how real strength often lies in remaining unaffected by the very things that others use to claim dominance. If you found these insights into the Sigma female's impact on a man's ego as compelling as we do, don't miss out on more. Subscribe to our channel for more deep dives and intriguing content that challenges conventional thinking and explores the dynamics of powerful personalities. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more thought-provoking discussions and revelations. Thanks for watching, Jules. See you in the next video. Bye for now, and stay blessed.